key focal points. A day before many of Europe's borders open up, we look at how one border town hotel helped a pair of lovers keep their passion alive.
The room number 9 is crossed by the border. So you will be in Switzerland all the night long. She will be in France all the night long, but you will be in the same bed.
And why so many people across the world are clamoring to get back to the gym as they end their coronavirus lockdowns. That's after the news.
Hello, I'm David Harper with the BBC News. Police in the US city of Atlanta have used tear gas to disperse protesters during unrest sparked by the police shooting of a black suspect. Crowds set fire to a drive-through restaurant which was close to the scene of the latest killing and blocked a major road nearby. Atlanta's police chief has resigned. Peter Bowes has more detail.
The police said Rayshard Brooks, who was 27, had fallen asleep in his car while waiting in a queue at a drive-through restaurant. He was shot during a confrontation with 2 white officers after the police say he resisted arrest, having failed a sobriety test. The director of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation said video captured by cameras inside the restaurant appeared to show that Mr. Brooks had one of the officers' tasers in his hand as he fled.
More than 100 people have been arrested in London following attacks on police by crowds of protesters, including far-right activists. The demonstrators said they wanted to protect monuments, including a statue of Britain's wartime leader, Winston Churchill, which was vandalised during a recent anti-racism rally. Sean Dilley reports.
The demonstrations turned violent after hundreds of self-proclaimed statue defenders took over areas near the Houses of Parliament and Trafalgar Square, with many hurling missiles, smoke grenades, glass bottles and flares at police officers. Outside the Palace of Westminster, a man was pictured urinating against a memorial to PC Keith Palmer, who was killed in the Westminster Bridge terror attack in 2017. The chairman of the Police Memorial Trust, Geraldine Winner, said the man's behaviour was despicable. The violent scenes in Westminster contrasted with largely peaceful anti-racism protests elsewhere.
Argentina, Chile, Peru and Colombia have reported a record number of Covid-19 infections in the past 24 hours, increasing concerns about the spread of the disease in Latin America. Here's our America's editor, Leonardo Rocha.
Argentina imposed strict quarantine measures nearly 3 months ago, but the number of cases has gone up since the government began to ease the lockdown. Peru has struggled to control the spread of the virus since it arrived in the country in March. In Colombia, as in Mexico, the number of cases has increased sharply in the last few weeks. But the biggest source of concern is Brazil, where more than 850 people have died since Friday. It has the second highest number of fatalities in the world after the United States, but shops and businesses have been reopened across the country.
The Chilean president, Sebastián Piñera, has announced the resignation of his health minister following accusations that the authorities have underreported the number of coronavirus deaths. The official figure is just over 3,000, but an investigative website said the minister, Jaime Manuelich, told the World Health Organization that the true number was probably nearer 5,000. World news from the BBC. South Korea has urged the North to honour agreements between them after Pyongyang warned that it was preparing to take unspecified action. The government in Seoul said it was taking the current situation seriously. On Saturday, Kim Yo-jung, the sister of North Korea's leader, appeared to hint that any future measure might involve the military. The South African President, Cyril Ramaphosa, has called for an end to what he said was a culture of silence around gender-based violence. It follows the killing of a woman in a Johannesburg township on Friday. Mr. Ramaphosa said there'd been a rise in such violence since coronavirus restrictions were eased. Will Ross reports.
The news that the body of a young woman was found dumped under a tree in Soweto has prompted South Africa's president to once again express his disgust at the violence. Cyril Ramaphosa listed the names of 3 other women whose bodies had been found in the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal province before describing it as a dark and shameful week for the entire nation. The South African president said violent men were taking advantage of the eased restrictions on movement to attack women and children. He said the manner of the killings pointed to an unconscionable level of barbarism and a lack of humanity.
Islamist militants have attacked a strategic garrison town in Nigeria's northeast Borno state. Residents say that at least 6 people have been killed, including soldiers and civilians. Some reports put that number of dead higher. The jihadists reportedly stormed the town of Monguno on Saturday, firing guns and rocket-propelled grenades and overpowering government troops. Villagers in Peru have freed 8 engineers they'd kidnapped over fears they were installing 5G technology, which some locals mistakenly believe spreads the coronavirus. Technicians from the broadband provider Gilat Peru were repairing an antenna when they were seized on Wednesday. A Transport Ministry spokesperson said the country had no 5G antennas. BBC News.
Hello, it's 6 minutes past 4 GMT, and you're with the newsroom from the BBC World Service with me, Emilio San Pedro. Violence has returned to the streets of Atlanta in the U.S. state of Georgia after a police officer shot dead a 27-year-old black man. Rayshard Brooks was found asleep in the car park of a fast food restaurant on Friday night. He failed a sobriety test before resisting arrest and grabbing an officer's taser. His death has renewed a wave of anger over police brutality in the United States. In the last hour, the restaurant where Rayshard Brooks was killed has been set on fire to the applause of some onlookers. At one point, the protesters also shut down a major interstate highway in the city. Richard Rose from the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, was at the protest before they turned violent and says many are angry about what they believe is systemic injustice.
There's a lot of frustration because what young black people see is the continued drumbeat of injustice instead of a drumbeat toward justice. They are, in many cases, unemployed, undereducated, and they know they have not had a fair shake in America. They see all this opulence around them, and of course they feel disenfranchised.
The death of Rayshard Brooks has prompted the resignation of the city's chief police officer, Erica Shields, and the city's mayor, Keisha Lance Bottom, says the force must overhaul its culture.
While we have a police force full of men and women who work alongside our communities with honor, respect, and dignity, there has been a disconnect with what our expectations are and should be as it relates to interactions with our officers and the communities in which they are entrusted to protect.
Christian Boone is a journalist with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution newspaper who has reported on the city's police force for many years. I spoke to him a short time ago.
I do think it was her decision. She was fairly popular. You know, she was sort of ahead of the game on a lot of this reform. She spoke quite candidly about past mistakes made by the department, and she, spoke about not having that kind of mentality where everyone's, locking everyone up. She doesn't fit the profile of the Southern police chief that people may have.
And Atlanta itself doesn't fit that profile, does it?
No, it certainly does not. I mean, I think Atlanta sees itself as a Southern city, but not of the South so much, certainly not of the Old South. Erica Shields was the first openly gay police chief in Atlanta, and it really wasn't an issue. So these are things you wouldn't see, perhaps, or probably not anywhere in Alabama or other parts of the South.
Christian Boone. Latin America during the pandemic is certainly no time to be a health minister. Brazil has had 3 in the past few months. 2 of them lost their jobs because of disagreements with the president on how to contain the spread of the coronavirus. Now Chile's health minister, Jaime Mañalich, has gone. His resignation was announced by the Chilean president, Sebastián Piñera, who also thanked the new health minister, Enrique París, for taking on the job.
You are taking on the leadership of the Ministry of Health in times of great difficulty and adversity, and that reflects not only courage, it also reflects a deep love for Chile and Chileans and a deep vocation of public service. His first mission will be to lead the fight against the coronavirus in order to protect the health and life of our compatriots.
So why did his predecessor, Jaime Mañalich, resign? Our correspondent, Jane Chambers, is in the capital, Santiago, where infections are at their highest.
He's always been very much a controversial figure. Some people say that he's arrogant and he doesn't listen to other people or want their advice from health experts or the local mayors. He has made some unfortunate comments. He admitted that he really hadn't realized quite how bad living conditions were for so many people in Santiago.
And has this just simply laid bare even further the divide in Chile between rich and poor?
I really think it has. People are told to quédate en casa, to stay at home, and yes, if you're reasonably well off, you can work from home. And like many countries, there's huge amounts of unemployment. We're plunging into a recession, and the rich are fine. You know, there are stories of them going on their helicopters to their second homes, and yes, there is a big divide. But also the big thing recently has been these different figures that are coming out. I mean, in the daily press meeting, they're saying that more than 3,000 deaths have been recorded, whereas it's recently been leaked that the deaths they're telling the World Health Organization are 5,000.
Latin America has become one of the focal points now of the pandemic, and Chile in particular, as we're hearing, is struggling. Why is it struggling so much to cope with this?
Well, it's a difficult one because initially it was doing well, and I think one of the problems where they're saying people could go out now and have a coffee or a beer with friends, so people became relaxed and then infections surged, and they've made their way to really poor areas where social distancing is very, very difficult. So we're in this strict lockdown, we're just going into the 5th week, and you have to get special permits to go anywhere, but lots of people are just ignoring that because they would say, look, you know, I have to get out to work. Also, we're going into winter, so the infection is just racing around, which is making it really hard.
Now, a lot of people will be making this comparison, perhaps. They've seen President Bolsonaro in Brazil going through a situation where he had to remove a health minister and then a second health minister. Has Sebastián Piñera in Chile, how's he been dealing with the crisis in comparison to Mr. Bolsonaro, let's say, who's been denying that it's even a problem?
To be fair to Sebastián Piñera, it's a very different approach. He's definitely not as extreme. I mean, earlier on in March, we had preventative measures, rolling lockdowns, closing the borders. He's absolutely never said it doesn't exist. They've tried very hard to get ventilators, to increase capacity in hospitals, but it is a difficult one. I mean, a lot of people simply don't trust the government, and with these infections surging, it's becoming more difficult.
Jane Chambers in Santiago. On Monday, borders between many European countries will reopen after being closed for 3 months in a bid to halt the spread of the coronavirus. These are the countries which have had open borders and free movement for years. So how did they cope during the lockdown? Imogen Folks reports from one tiny village and its historic hotel on the French-Swiss border, and how it helped one couple keep their love affair kindling without breaking the rules.
For 4 generations, Alexander Perron's family has run a hotel which sits right on the border. There's an entrance in France and an entrance in Switzerland.
We're sitting at a table in your bar now, and I'm sitting in Switzerland.
And I am just in front of you, and I am in France.
But 3 months ago, as the coronavirus spread across Europe, the borders were closed. No more free movement. The village was divided, the hotel in no man's land. For Alexander's sister Veronique, it was a shock.
De douaniers suisses autant que français.
We hadn't seen border guards here for 20 years. All the people who used to come here to chat, have a coffee, they couldn't. We couldn't cross. Not by car, not by foot.
For families, friends and couples across Europe, the border closures caused heartbreak. And Alexander saw a way to help.
The woman came here. She said to me, I have a problem. I am in love with a Swiss man, and I'm not allowed to go in Switzerland.
Undaunted, Alexander put in a call to the boyfriend.
I have a solution for you. It's the room number 9. The room number 9 is crossed by the border. So you will be in Switzerland all the night long. She will be in France all the night long, but you will be in the same bed. So they stayed for all the weekend, and it was marvelous for them.
And it wasn't just distraught lovers who benefited. Veronique saw a way to support the fight against the virus.
Il y a des infirmières françaises qui sont...
There are French nurses who work on the Swiss side, so we offered them rooms for free.
As Alexander explains, they were carrying on a family tradition.
It made me think about my grandfather and my grandmother. Because World War II, the border was closed too.
Here on the wall of the hotel, there's a certificate from Britain's World War II Commander Field Marshal Montgomery, thanking Alexander and Veronique's grandparents for helping British pilots and Jewish refugees and French resistance fighters too to escape occupied France by smuggling them through the hotel and into neutral Switzerland.
So in just a few short hours, the borders will open again. For Veronique and Alexander, it's been a time to reflect on what borders, closed or open, actually mean.
We are so used to passing back and forth. We want this border open easily. It's so much nicer when we don't have this barrier.
We just had 3 months without crossing the border. So we can have the thinking about it, freedom. And on Monday, everybody will be liberated again.
That was Imogen Folks reporting from the Franco-Swiss Hotel. You're listening to the BBC World Service. Still to come on the newsroom.
The everyday sounds are starting to strike up once more, like an orchestra tuning up before a performance. There's a new dawn and a new normal, but the same old city.
The reflections of one of our colleagues on life in London during this coronavirus pandemic. First, David has the headlines.
Demonstrators in the US city of Atlanta have set fire to a fast food restaurant and blocked a major road in protest at the fatal shooting by police of a black man. More than 100 people have been arrested in London following violent clashes between far-right demonstrators and police, and the health minister have underreported the number of coronavirus deaths.
Russia and Turkey will hold talks today that are expected to focus on efforts to end the fighting in Libya. Moscow and Ankara support opposing sides in the conflict, which has displaced tens of thousands of people. Here's our Middle East analyst, Alan Johnston.
Russia and Turkey have given no details as to what exactly will be discussed at this meeting, but there's little doubt that high on the agenda will be the war in Libya. Russia and Turkey both have significant influence in the conflict. The Turks support the government based in Libya's capital, Tripoli. Russia backs the other side. It supports the warlord, General Khalifa Haftar. In recent weeks, he suffered a series of major defeats. The government side has pushed General Haftar far back into eastern Libya. Earlier this week, Russia said it shared with Turkey a desire to create conditions for talks and reconciliation. And perhaps at today's meeting they'll discuss ways of reining in their allies on the ground and persuading them to accept a ceasefire.
One of the biggest mining companies in the world, BHP, has suspended plans to expand a mine in remote Western Australia after concerns it would destroy dozens of sacred indigenous sites. The decision follows anger over the destruction of a 46,000-year-old Aboriginal cave by another resources company, Rio Tinto. This report from Phil Mercer.
The ancient Juukan Gorge caves in Western Australia's Pilbara region were destroyed by Rio Tinto as it expands a multi-billion-dollar iron ore mine. There were protests outside its offices in Perth. The company has apologised for the distress it caused, but Indigenous leader Robert Eggington says it was vandalism on a massive scale.
Something you could equate to as if they blew up the pyramids in Egypt because they might have had uranium or found gold under the pyramids.
The mining giant did have government approval to destroy the ancient sites, but officials now concede the destruction of the caves was a genuine mistake. Campaigners want the right to appeal against ministerial decisions, and Aboriginal heritage laws in Western Australia are being reviewed. Indigenous elder Dolores Corbett says sacred sites must be protected.
I just hope that this never ever happens again without fully understanding the hurt the Aboriginal people go through.
The backlash has prompted another resources giant, BHP, to halt plans to destroy up to 40 cultural sites to expand a mine in Western Australia. It says it will consult closely with Aboriginal groups. Land lies at the heart of Indigenous culture. It's seen as the mother of creation and a living, breathing mass that's full of secrets and wisdom.
Phil Mercer. Time for sport now. Having defeated the coronavirus threat in the country and with the lockdown restrictions eased, crowds were allowed back in to watch New Zealand's Super Rugby tournament, and the competition steps up a gear today. Andy Barwell here with more details.
Yes, those fans in Dunedin yesterday were rewarded with a thriller of a game. The home side Highlanders snatched the victory over Chiefs in the very last minute of the match. And the second game of that 10-week-long 5-team tournament is underway at the moment. Over 40,000 at Eden Park in Auckland at the moment, enjoying Blues playing Hurricanes. They're approaching half-time there, and Blues are leading 14 points to 13.
And Andy, the latest round of coronavirus testing in English Premier League football returned 2 positive results from 2 clubs. What does this mean with the season set to resume this week after a 3-month suspension?
Yes, it seems an awful long time ago when we saw the last action. We hear that 1,200 players and staff have now been tested, the latest set of testing last week, ahead of the first games in the Premier League, which will start on Wednesday. Norwich City, they've confirmed that one of their players gave a positive test and that the player was involved in a friendly against Tottenham Hotspur. The unnamed player to self-isolate for 7 days. Spurs have pointed out that there was what they call no close contact, and the government's definition of close contact being within 2 metres of a confirmed case for 15 minutes or more. So Spurs are saying they're okay.
And what's been happening in the rest of the major European leagues?
Well, Bayern Munich now need just one more win to win the German Bundesliga title. Barcelona move 5 points clear at the top of Spain's La Liga, 4-0 winners over Real Mallorca, and Napoli are through to face Juventus in Wednesday's Italian Coppa final.
Andy Barwell, thank you. During COVID-19 lockdowns, many around the world resorted to home workouts with mixed success. In Florida, frustration over fitness facilities closing even led to a protest outside a courthouse mid-pandemic, with demonstrators shouting, "Give me gains" or "Give me death." Now, a new study suggests more people are looking forward to getting back to the gym than any other activity. Stephanie Prentice explains.
Many everyday leisure activities have been notably absent in countries around the world for the past few months. But in the UK, at least, people are most excited to get back to this. New research polling 2,000 people from Sport England says the gym is the activity people have missed most during the lockdown. I asked my Twitter followers why this may be.
You cannot get the same level of workout at home than you can in the gym. It's just much more specialist.
I've been drinking so much during COVID, staying in, that the first thing I want to do as soon as the restrictions are lifted is go to the gym and get healthy.
It's hard to be healthy when you're also just piling on the flab from sitting around eating. So desperate to get back to the gym.
It used to be a routine of mine, and it was just a nice little bit of space.
I can't go to a pub until I lose this lockdown weight. So I need the gyms to open first so that I can look presentable going to a pub.
In Italy, one of the countries with the highest death toll, gyms are now reopening, and the same is happening in parts of Australia and New Zealand. In the US, gyms made their way onto phase 1 of President Trump's reopening plan, but in the UK, the government is still working out how to make gyms, leisure centres and sports clubs safe. I spoke to George Vaness, who runs Jabbox Gym in Mayfair in London, about the challenges gyms now face.
In terms of COVID-19 cleanliness, so in a boutique fitness studio like ours, for instance, it gets cleaned after every session. So every 45 minutes it gets a thorough clean. Now, obviously, that's a massive part of it. So a person coming in will have their own gloves, own equipment in terms of dumbbells. They will use that in their area, and then after that session, it gets a thorough clean. In today's world, we realise more than ever that health is everything.
Some gym chains are now attempting socially distanced outdoor workouts, with changes to UK restrictions expected but not confirmed for July.
Stephanie Prentice. And now David has some other stories from our news desk.
A COVID-19 patient in the United States who recovered after 2 months in hospital has received a bill for more than $1 million. The charges for Michael Floor's medical treatment included nearly $10,000 a day for his intensive care room and $2,000 a day for a ventilator. The bill is expected to be largely covered by a US government insurance program. China reported 57 new cases of the coronavirus on Sunday, the highest daily figure since April, as concerns grow about a resurgence of the disease. The National Health Commission said 36 of the new cases were domestic infections in Beijing. Friday saw the first cases recorded in the capital for 2 months. And today is the anniversary of the end of the Falklands War in 1982, when Argentine forces formally surrendered to UK troops on the islands. Normally commemorations would include a service, followed by wreath-laying and a military parade involving all Falklands War veterans. But this year's events have been cancelled in the light of the Covid-19 pandemic.
During this coronavirus pandemic lockdown, London's bustling streets, which are usually teeming with people out chasing their own special piece of the city, have gone eerily quiet. Now, after nearly 3 months, life is very slowly beginning to return to normal. From Monday, all non-essential shops, including department stores, will be reopening to the public, but bars, restaurants, pubs, hairdressers, and the West End's fabled theatres will have to wait a bit longer, until at least the 4th of July. The newsroom's Gareth Barlow reflects on how the British capital has been changed by the silence that engulfed it when it was struck by COVID-19.
By day, the roads here run like rivers, a flood of people on each pavement, with the renowned red buses sailing down the centre of the street. By night, pedestrians replaced by parcels and packages, a fleet of delivery vans stocking up the stores for the next day's sales. But that flood has reduced to a trickle, the vans replaced by a few taxis dashing down deserted streets. The flagship stores of some of the world's biggest brands still stand proud, their bright lights chasing off the darkness of the summer night. But on every door and every window, there's a familiar sign, an apology, that due to the exceptional circumstances, life just can't remain the same. London's seen a lot of life and a lot of history. After being ground down by German bombs during the Blitz, or being shocked and saddened by terror attacks in recent times, the city has always come back to life within a few hours or a few days. This time, it's different. There's a sense that London, one of the most important cities on the planet, is a slumbering giant. Long gone are the sounds of cheering crowds supporting football teams, the pomp and pageantry of gay pride, the chink of pint glasses, or the chatter of crowds enjoying a night in the West End. Instead, for months, an odd calm has prevailed. The sounds now, the hum of cooling systems, the swish of a road sweeper, the buzz of the odd electric car. Only when a siren pierces the silence, or if you descend underground and get reminded to mind the gap, does the familiarity of the city's soundscape return. There's a temptation to revel in London as it is now, a peaceful, almost tranquil city. But the sad reality is that the undertone to the sense of calm is the tragic loss of lives due to the pandemic. The desire to protect the health system and the most vulnerable, the reason people are staying off the streets. But this slumbering giant lives on. Cranes at construction sites whir overhead, and trucks grumble as workers install new cycle lanes, ready for people to flood back onto the streets. Because London is starting to reawaken. The everyday sounds are starting to strike up once more, like an orchestra tuning up before a performance. The honk of car horns, the hubbub from a few more commuters. There's a new dawn and a new normal, but the same old city.
Gareth Barlow. A reminder now of our main news. Demonstrators in the U.S. city of Atlanta have set fire to a fast food restaurant and blocked a major road in protest at the fatal shooting by police of a black man. That's all from us. You'll be listening to the newsroom from the BBC World Service with me, Emilio San Pedro, here in London. Thanks for joining us.
This is the BBC World Service.
I am Michelle Madsen. I'm a freelance journalist and I investigate corruption in West Africa.
A corruption scandal is shaking my country and your name has been mentioned.
A news story accusing a presidential candidate of corruption was written in my name, or almost in my name.
In Senegal, it was the #1 priority of all newspapers. Let's find Michelle Damson.
This story was published last year during the run-up to the election in Senegal, and everyone thought it was written by me. It wasn't.
You are doing investigation about yourself. your own self. That's not normal.
I want to try and find out who did write it. It's my fake news whodunit.
Today at 13 GMT. On digital radio, television and your smart speaker, this is the BBC World Service. You can explore our upcoming programmes and delve into the archive online at bbcworldservice.com or on the BBC Sounds app. Listeners to BBC Radio 4 will be leaving us shortly after a summary of the world news, and you can rejoin us tomorrow morning from 1 o'clock. We wish you a safe and pleasant Sunday.
BBC News with David Harper. There have been disturbances in the US city of Atlanta after the fatal shooting by police of a black man on Friday. Protesters have blocked a major road and set fire to a drive-through restaurant close to the scene of the killing. The death of Rayshard Brooks follows weeks of nationwide protests over the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. The police chief in Atlanta has resigned. More than 100 people have been arrested in London following attacks on police by crowds of protesters, including far-right activists. The Prime Minister Boris Johnson condemned the violence, saying there was no place in Britain for racist thuggery. Chile, Argentina, Peru and Colombia have all reported a record daily rise in coronavirus infections, increasing concerns about the spread of the disease across the region. In Brazil, more than 850 people have died since Friday. Villagers in Peru have freed 8 telecoms workers they'd kidnapped over fears they were installing 5G technology. Some residents of Acoamba province mistakenly believe that phone masts spread the virus. Islamist militants have attacked a town in the northeast Nigerian state of Borno. Residents of Monguno say at least 6 people were killed. An offshoot of Boko Haram says it carried out the attack. Turkey and Russia are expected to hold talks in Istanbul on Sunday on efforts to end the fighting in Libya. The two governments, who back opposing sides in the conflict, have recently said they want to create the conditions for reconciliation. South Korea has urged the North to honour agreements between them after Pyongyang warned that it was preparing to take unspecified action. The government in Seoul said they took the current situation seriously. A coronavirus patient in the United States who recovered after 2 months in hospital has received a bill for more than $1 million. The cost is expected to be largely covered by a government insurance programme. BBC News.